Coming up on the Phillies Nation Trade Deadline Special, presented by BQ Basement Systems, Pat and Corey break down what happened around the league and what didn't happen with the Phillies. Could they have done more, or were they right to stay pat? Kevin Wilson and Matt Stairs return with hitting tips, Tommy Green talks pitching, and I've got the fan questions. That's next on the Phillies Nation Trade Deadline Special.
Welcome in, everybody. It is Phillies Nation, our post-trade deadline special. It's brought to you, of course, by BQ Basement Systems. Corey Simon, Pat Gallen here at Fieldhouse Sports and Beer Hall. Well, you and I talked before the deadline hit. We both thought that they would probably make one, maybe two trades. They come away and make no trades before the July 31st deadline. I know a lot of Phillies fans are a little bit upset about what has gone down, but tell us why you think the Phillies made no deals at the deadline. None.
Well, this seed wasn't planted today. This was something in the motion for years. I mean, when Ruben Amaro signed Jonathan Papelbon to that $50 million deal a couple off seasons ago, and also included a 17-team no-trade clause, when he gave Cliff Lee a $12.5 million buyout on the final year of that deal. Just so many contract complications. But going beyond the contract complications, the Phillies just misread this market. We saw John Lester command a serious return from the Red Sox.
Absolutely.
We saw David Price move. We saw Justin Masterson move. We saw John Lackey get the Red Sox a couple of useful pieces. The Phillies got nothing. I mean, you can't really fault Ruben Amaro for not pulling the trigger on a deal he wasn't thrilled about.
Right.
But to make no trades, you can't make any excuses. This was a failure.
All right, he stood pat and he said, I want this, I want to get this, and if I don't get it, I'm not trading my players. But should he have taken that route when it comes to guys like Bastardo, Burnett, Bird? Should he try to have gotten as much as he could or anything for those guys?
In certain cases, yes. And Antonio Bastardo, I think you would have been better off trading him for a mid-level single-A reliever. Get rid of the $1 million remaining salary or so. He's not a guy you want to pay $3.5 million next year in his final year of arbitration. But no, I don't think so. When you look at the David Price trade, for example, the David Price trade, the Rays take back shortstop Nick Franklin from the Mariners. They get a young shortstop prospect who's 18 years old, and they get Drew Smyly from the Tigers. To me, that's not even close to fair value for David Price. So if all the Phillies were finding were offers like that for a Cole Hamels, for a Cliff Lee, it's a good thing they stood pat. I would have liked to see them move A.J. Burnett, but again, the contract complications.
That's true. Do you think, though, that they were overvaluing guys like Bird and Burnett? Because we talked about the Mariners being there, the Royals possibility, the Cardinals a possibility with Burnett. And as trades went down, there were fewer and fewer suitors for those guys. But do you think Ruben was saying, I want three of your best prospects for a guy that really didn't deserve three of your best?
Well, when we're talking overvaluing your own guys, the two guys that come to my mind are Cole Hamels and Marlon Byrd, and I don't think Ruben Amaro was wrong to overvalue either of them. Cole Hamels is a left-handed ace in his prime. He's 30 years old. These guys don't come around every year to be traded at the deadline.
Right.
And with Byrd, literally, he was the best power bat on the market, not counting Yoenis Cespedes because nobody knew that he was available.
True.
Marlon Byrd has been at the top of the National League all season in extra base hits, one of only two NL outfielders as of earlier this week to have at least 20 home runs, he and Giancarlo Stanton. So he had so much trade value that Ruben Amaro should have been looking for the sun and the moon for Marlon Byrd. And that he didn't trade Byrd now, I don't think is a huge thing because the Phillies had nobody to come in and play right field.
All right, well, a counterpoint to that is with Bird and Burnett, they're both in their mid to late 30s. The longer you wait for these guys, you have arm troubles that could happen with pitchers like a guy like A.J. Burnett or Marlon Byrd. He really doesn't have a great track record when it comes to power hitting. It was just a couple of seasons ago that he was let go by the Boston Red Sox. So, in theory, maybe they should have gotten rid of these guys because you never know what's going to happen with late 30s players.
In theory, yes, but Marlon Byrd, for example, the highest line drive rate of his career, these last 2 years have not been a fluke. This has been legitimate power production from Marlon Byrd, and on top of all that, he gives you solid right field defense. He's one of the more complete corner outfielders in the NL, if you can believe that, despite his age.
All right, and what happens now is the question because we've got the August waiver trade deadline, which is actually August 31st.
Right.
So guys can still be moved. It's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit different than the July 31st deadline, but do you see any of these guys possibly being moved at that point?
The way that these August waiver trades work is a team places a player on waivers. In order for the player to be traded, he must either be claimed by a player or clear waivers, and then you can shop him around to the league. They'll put everybody on waivers because if they don't want to get rid of the guy, they can just rescind him, take him off waivers. The Phillies are known to make these August moves. It's how they traded Michael Young. It's how they traded Joe Blanton.
John Lester goes to the Oakland A's. Yoenis Cespedes goes to the Boston Red Sox. And Boston, I think, had it right because they said to themselves, look, we know we're not going to win this year. John Lester, he's going to be leaving after the season, trying to see what he can get on the free agent market. So talk a little bit about that trade and what it means for both sides.
Well, in my opinion, the Red Sox completely won the trade deadline. The Red Sox did with John Lester what the Phillies couldn't do with Cole Hamels in 2012. Exact same situation. Impending left-handed ace free agent. The Phillies signed Hamels to that $144 million extension rather than trade him to Texas, rather than trade him to the Angels. The Red Sox, for 2 months of John Lester, they got one of the top power-hitting outfielders in all of baseball in Yoenis Cespedes. I don't see any way that's not a huge win. Power in the outfield was the Red Sox's biggest need, and they filled it, and they still have the ability to re-sign John Lester in the offseason, though I don't think that's going to happen. But the point here, the Red Sox didn't feel comfortable giving John Lester $150+ million. And that's why they're a well-run organization. You can't hand out these contracts like they're candy.
I think you're absolutely right about that, and that's why I love what the Red Sox are doing. They go from worst to first, win the World Series, and then they go back into the basement, but they've got a plan in place. At least the Boston Red Sox have a plan in place. We're asking ourselves here in Philadelphia, what exactly is the plan? We're throwing out there, maybe things happen in August, maybe they don't, maybe in December something happens. We don't even know if the general manager is going to be here full term, so it's really a lot of interesting questions with the Phillies, but at least the Red Sox, we can look to them and say they have a definitive plan.
And that's a great point, because the lack of a plan, in my opinion, is the biggest fault of this year, of this regime, of this whole trade period, is that, you know, if the Phillies were to sell off some of their veterans, if they traded Cliff Lee, if they traded Cole Hamels, even if they traded a Jimmy Rollins type, which I wouldn't have wanted to see, if that happened, there was the fear in the organization that fans wouldn't come to the ballpark. Well, the reason fans aren't coming to the ballpark is because they're losing, but it's also because there doesn't seem to be a plan in place. There doesn't seem to be hope for the future or a retooling effort going on, and, you know, that's a major reason why attendance and just interest in the team has been on the decline.
All right, so Yoenis Cespedes for John Lester. Let me throw this one out at you. If Cliff Lee were healthy, didn't have the elbow issues, and maybe if he did have the elbow issues but came back strong, do you think that that's a trade that could have matched up between the two teams, Cliff Lee going to Oakland for Cespedes instead of Boston?
You know, if the Phillies were able to pick up all of Cliff Lee's remaining money, which I'm sure they would have done to get Yoenis Cespedes, yeah, I do. And it's just ironic that this year, unlike other years, rentals seem like they were in more demand than non-rentals. Like John Lester, 2 months of John Lester got that serious return just because the Athletics didn't want to have contractual commitments going forward. Usually, you see a team want to get a Cole Hamels type who's going to be under control for 4 years. This year, Lester had more value.
You're absolutely right about that. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more on the trade deadline. It is the post-trade deadline special here for Phillies Nation with Corey and Pat.
We're here at Kevin Wilson's personal batting cage at the Chandler Bat Factory in Norristown. Kevin is a hitting consultant for some current major leaguers, some former major leaguers, and a lot of the elite prospects, both locally and nationally. So, Kev, I want to start off by asking you just about some of the guys that you've worked with over the years and the type of advice that you like to give these guys.
Yeah, Corey. I mean, the biggest thing for me is trying to be a mentor, trying to be somebody that is a confidant, somebody they can rely on, fall back on, that kind of stuff. Talk through some situations, not so much kind of tell them what to do, but just kind of help them navigate through the ups and downs, basically, of a professional season.
And I understand you're actually pretty tight with Charlie Manuel. I'm just curious how that connection was made and what you and Charlie like to talk about.
Yeah, you know, Charlie and I, we've become good friends, and I'm very, very fortunate for that aspect of it. And you know, he's a mentor of mine. I love to talk hitting with him. I love to kind of pick his brain on a lot of things, and I think all Philadelphia understands kind of what Charlie is. He was here for a while. He's still working with the team, obviously, but for me to be able to pick a brain of a guy like Charlie Manuel, who I think is one of the best hitting coaches, if not the best hitting coach in the game today, just how simple he is with his approach, just how simple he is with relating to people, things of that nature. I really try to feed off of that. I really try to learn every day from him. And you and Charlie actually did a recent radio interview on a KW radio, which you're starting up now, and I actually listened to a clip of it recently on a two-strike approach when the umpire is calling some stuff wide and some stuff high, and the advice that you give to guys. I'm just curious, what's your goal and what's your mission here with KW Radio? KW Radio was started by Joe Ferrero, who's the host, and myself. Joe's a best friend of mine. We've known each other for years. And Charlie came on. He's going to be our very first show on August 1st, which is going to be great. And we taped it the other day. And I'll tell you what, there's not many times that you're going to be able to get Charlie Manuel in a room to talk hitting the way he did for the normal public. Yourself, myself, everybody, we've had the fortune of doing that. What we've created is that kind of clubhouse atmosphere where you feel like you're sitting right across from him, just hearing him talk some hitting. And on August 1st, when we unveil that interview, it's just chock full of good stuff, good information, simple, to the point, no gimmicks, no nothing, but just Charlie off the cuff talking hitting.
Good to hear from Kevin Wilson again. Corey and Pat back with you here on the post-trade deadline special on Phillies Nation. And we go into our segment that's by the numbers. It's brought to you by BQ Basement Systems. You can call them today for a free estimate. They have flexible payment options. Why don't you start us off?
Jon Lester, traded from the Red Sox to the Athletics at the deadline on deadline day. The last calendar year, Jon Lester has the lowest ERA in all of the American League at 2.61. So, yes, he's having a career year, but this goes back over his last 32 starts, actually. And over the last calendar year, the only pitcher in baseball who's been worth more wins above replacement than Jon Lester is Felix Hernandez.
That's it.
That's it. Goes Felix Hernandez, Jon Lester, and then David Price. David Price also dealt on deadline day from the Rays to the Tigers. And, you know, David Price has fared very well against the AL Central in his career. 14-8 with a 2.84 ERA. Price is against the Twins, White Sox, Indians, and Royals. So if he can continue to make mincemeat out of those foes, the Tigers are going to win that division easily.
All right, and going from the Oakland Athletics to the Boston Red Sox outfielder Yoenis Cespedes, having a pretty good post-All-Star break. A .326 average, 3 home runs, 11 runs batted in, throw 5 doubles in there, an OPS of .963. We know the dude's got a cannon for an arm, and he's in the middle of an order, and he's going to be seeing Fenway's, you know, the green monster in left field. He's going to be aiming for that over and over again. I like that move, and so far so good on the other side of the All-Star break for Yoenis Cespedes. Looking back at the best trade deadline deals of all time, Grady Sizemore is in the best of all time. And here's how this one breaks down. You remember the Bartolo Colon trade with the Indians. Cliff Lee, Grady Sizemore, and Brandon Phillips. They were worth 95.7 WAR in that trade. Pretty interesting. Not all for the Indians, but throughout their career. Also, Randy Johnson, the second best trade of all time, worth over 81 WAR for the Mariners when he was dealt. And then Sammy Sosa and Wilson Alvarez were traded from the White Sox to the Cubs in 1989, worth 77 WAR. Let's go to our fantasy baseball segment. It's brought to you by DraftKings.com. It is the future of fantasy sports, free one-day leagues where you can win cash prizes. Who do you have?
You just mentioned Yoenis Cespedes. I want to talk about some guys who have their value fantasy-wise affected by trades. Yoenis Cespedes goes from the Oakland Coliseum, which is a spacious park, to Fenway, which is one of the smallest parks. Over the last 3 seasons, Yoenis Cespedes has lost 11 home runs to left field and to right field in Oakland that would have been home runs at Fenway Park. 4 to left field, 7 to right field. Remember, the right field line at Fenway is 302 feet.
Yeah.
In Oakland, it's 330 feet. So it's going to make a huge difference. Wow. I could see Cespedes hitting like 40 home runs over a full season at Fenway.
That's going to look beautiful at Fenway. You got to love that one. Who else do you have? Justin Masterson.
And the thing with Justin Masterson is, ostensibly, it would seem that going from the AL to the NL, his ERA would improve. But with Justin Masterson, it's never been an issue of stuff. It's been that he can't throw strikes consistently. He's one of those A.J. Burnett types who can give you the 6-walk game. And he's been dreadful against lefties this year and for most of his career. So those issues need to correct themselves. You know, I wouldn't run a trade for Justin Masterson in a fantasy league, but if he's available on the waiver wire, he's worth an ad.
Maybe also look out for Jon Lester playing at Oakland Coliseum, as you mentioned, and how spacious it is. It's not a hitter's paradise. Lester could fare pretty well there, as you've seen Scott Kazmir do, as you've seen Sonny Gray do, and as you expect Jeff Samardzija to do as well. That's it for our fantasy baseball segment, brought to you by DraftKings.com. It is the future of fantasy sports with free one-day leagues. When we come back, Ryan's got questions for us. Don't go anywhere. It's Phillies Nation.
Welcome back to Phillies Nation. I'm Ryan Williams here with Pat and Corey, and it's time for our Batters in Box questions, where the guys debate your question and I'll pick the winner. Who's ready to win?
I'm ready.
We'll see. Our first question, what stood out most about this year's trade deadline? Pat?
Well, to me, the trade deadline always brings ridiculous rumors, agents leaking stuff out there. Now, it always turns out to be that the trade deadline is more smoke than fire, but this year it was actually pretty good. But still, social media to me has ruined the trade deadline because there's a rumor here, there's a rumor there, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that, there's a fake Twitter account here. It's absolutely ruined the trade deadline. I cannot stand that part of it. Now again, it was a really good trade deadline with Lester moving for Cespedes and David Price moving. So I like that part of it. Obviously, when there's big blockbuster deals, but I cannot stand that. Like, what goes through your mind when you're coming up with these fake Twitter accounts? I just don't get it.
All right, well, the old man over here doesn't like his social media. I'm going to go with just the love affair with prospects. What we saw in this trade deadline is that teams were more willing to trade players from their 25-man roster, guys like Drew Smiley, guys like Yoenis Cespedes, guys like Alan Craig, Joe Kelly. They were more willing to trade those guys than the unproven minor leaguers. And it's just, this love affair with prospects has been going on for years now. Teams just covet the young talent that's controllable, that's inexpensive. I think it's reached like a fever pitch. On one hand, it was really good to see a good old-fashioned baseball trade of Cespedes for Lester. But on the other hand, I mean, at some point, these prospects have to start switching teams again, right?
Yeah, you're right about that.
I'm going to agree with you on this one.
You don't like social media either?
No,
All
neither do I.
right,
There was so much hype and nothing happened.
There you go.
Our next question comes from a Phillies fan downstairs here at Fieldhouse.
Hey guys, this is Anthony from Philadelphia. My question is for Pat and Corey. I was actually wondering, aside from the Cliff Lee deal, what was the best deal the Phillies made at the trade deadline?
I'm going Roy Oswalt 2010 for several reasons. One, Oswalt was the missing piece the Phillies felt they needed that year, and he came in, he had an ERA below 1.8, if I believe, as a Philly. Was a guy that for the longest time I wanted to see come to the Phils, just his work ethic, his windup. I always loved his windup, and that was a sight to see every 5 days at CBP, but also the trade itself. The Phillies sold as high as possible on J. Happ. J. Happ was almost the centerpiece of that deal. It was J. Happ, Jonathan Villar, the shortstop, who's like a fringe major league shortstop, and Anthony Gose, who hasn't panned out with the Blue Jays. He was quickly dealt from Houston to Toronto, but that Oswalt trade, I loved everything about it. I love that the Phillies saw past the good numbers of J. Happ, looked at the peripherals, saw the high walk rate, and sold high.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of the Joe Blanton trade with the Oakland Athletics because after they picked up Joe Blanton, went 4-0 in the second half of the season. And what happened that year? They ended up winning the World Series. Now, not just because of Joe Blanton. They had a pretty good team that year. But if you take a look at this graphic here, he hit a home run in the World Series, won 2 games in the 2008 postseason. Now, 4-0 in the second half with a 4.20 ERA after joining the Phillies. But I was a fan in that trade. They got him because they needed a little bit more in the rotation, and they got just enough from Joe Blanton.
Well, it looks like back-to-back wins for you on this one.
All right, I finally win. I'll take it.
They got a World Series out of it.
It's true. See?
What's the
gotta
third
win.
question?
You got to win.
Our last question. What was the best trade made before the deadline, Pat?
I like the John Lester trade to Oakland. I think you're going to have the opposite view of that. But John Lester going to Oakland, we already talked about it. He's going to pitch at spacious Oakland Coliseum, which is great, obviously, for him and his numbers. And it's great for the Oakland Athletics because I love what Billy Beane's doing here. He's making the rotation formidable, making it 4 deep with Samardzija, with Gray, and with Kazmir, along with John Lester. He's just saying forget about it. I'm going for it right now. And he feels confident enough in the offense, led by Josh Donaldson, that they have enough to get over that hump. And that's, look, it's been 15 years of pretty decent baseball for the Oakland Athletics, yet they cannot get over that hump. I think John Lester can be the guy that finally gets them there. It's not going to be easy because the Angels are good and the Tigers just got David Price, but I'm a big fan of John Lester going from the Red Sox to the Oakland Athletics.
There aren't a whole lot of difference-making talents in baseball on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. Yoenis Cespedes is one of them, and to see him move to the Red Sox for 2 months of John Lester, incredible to me, especially considering how badly Boston needed some power out of the outfield. Cespedes to me is a guy who's both overrated and underrated at the same time. He's overrated because of the home run derby and all the highlight reel plays he makes, but then he's underrated because people look at the low on base percentage and they think that tells some sort of story. Well, no, it doesn't. When you look at Yoenis Cespedes, you look at the complete package, all the tools he has, the things that he can do that 99% of major leaguers cannot do. And for that reason, I got to say Yoenis Cespedes was the most impressive haul for any team. And real quick, under the radar move that I really liked was Martin Prado going to the Yankees. He can play everywhere on the field. He's always been a pesky hitter. I love him as a player, and he could have a good second half.
And with the Yankees getting Martin Prado, that took Marlon Byrd basically out of the sweepstakes. That could have been a landing spot for him. But alas, they get Martin Prado, a good deal for them.
You are going to win this week, but I'm going to have to award that point to Corey. Sorry.
All right, well, I'll take the win.
Still tied on the year, huh?
Is that right?
One of these weeks, I'm going to sweep you.
We'll see.
Well, that wraps up our Batters Inbox questions for this week. Have a question? Leave it for us on our Facebook and Twitter page. More Phillies news is coming right up.
Hi, I'm Tommy Green. Today we're going to talk about fraternizing. For your young kids, that means talking to your opposing team buddies before the game or during BP and stuff like that. in pro ball was we had probably had about a minute to spare. They'd give us a minute, and after that you got fined if you got caught after that. If you spent time either by the manager or kangaroo court, which was our way of policing ourselves in the clubhouse. But our fraternizing and stuff we did back in my era was after the game. After the games were over, if we wanted to talk, and we had some good friends over there, we went out to dinner or whatever if we had time, or go out and grab something real quick. But it's all right to say hey to them. Don't spend too much time there. It could cost your pocket.
All right, well, so probably the funniest question I have in the booth is when I'm trying to explain a bunt and the proper technique of bunting, because in my career, I've only bunted about 3 times in my whole life. So people get a chuckle of the technique how I teach, but it's something that I always practice on in batting practice, because you just never know. So the proper technique of bunting, it's all coming towards your lower half, your balance. A lot of people will get this way and square off the bunt. Actually, the proper technique is you take 1 step forward with your right foot, and it's a pivot. So now all of a sudden I'm in a good position where I'm balanced well. You keep the barrel out in front. You should be able to bunt a ball with 1 hand if the technique's proper. So as the ball is coming in, a lot of people will jab at it this way. It's all with your lower legs and lower half. So if the ball is low, I go down. If you notice the barrel and the bat does not move, everything's this way here. So if the fastball away, it's here. Fastball in, it's here. If you notice, the barrel never moves that area, and everything I do is I'm softening the ball with my legs. That is the proper technique of bunting, and the way I'm teaching it, you're surprised I had never bunted in my life.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Matt. Welcome back to Phillies Nation, presented by BQ Basement Systems. And Jimmy Rollins, sort of an odd month. He's hitting for a little bit of power, but not hitting for much average.
A little bit of power?
A little bit of power, yeah.
Jimmy Rollins has 12 extra base hits in the month of July. That's entering play on July 31st. 7 home runs, 5 doubles. Jimmy hitting .216 for the month with a .471 slugging percentage. I can't ever remember seeing Jimmy's isolated power, which is slugging minus batting average, that high. 7 home runs in the month. That's more than he had in 160 games last season.
Absolutely right about that. Let's go to our Twitter trivia. The hashtag is PNTrivia at Phillies Nation. It's brought to you by Scheib Vintage Sports. Last week, the question was, in the last 30 years, since 1984, who holds the single-season record for stolen bases for the Philadelphia Phillies? Do you know who that is?
Give it to me.
It is Juan Samuel. Of course, he had 72 back in 1984. This week, it pertains to a trade deadline trade partner with the Houston Astros. They gave the Phillies Roy Oswalt. Roy Oswalt, how many games did he win following his trade to the Phillies that year?
I know the number, but I'm not telling.
All right, don't tell. But you can tell us with the hashtag PNTrivia at Phillies Nation. Well, that's it for the post-trade deadline special here on Phillies Nation. Sorry we don't have better information to give you, but, you know, it is what it is. It's been a rough season for the Phillies. But the thank yous go all around, of course, to BQ Basement Systems, to the guys behind the camera for 2020, and Brian Michael. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, as always, of course, to the Fieldhouse Sports and Beer Hall as well. Come out and have your fantasy football draft here as well. I'm Pat Gallen. That's it for Phillies Nation. Thanks for hanging with us. We'll see you next time.